I think you got the point. James Bond is in operation. And what an operator he is in Ian Fleming's Thunderball.
With the release of Goldfinger in 1964, any doubt left about the impact the James Bond franchise had on pop culture was shattered to pieces. Like the other films before it, it was a smash hit success, even more so than the others. The franchise kept getting bigger and better with each new entry, so of course it was no surprise that a new Bond film was in the works, as traditionally revealed in the end credits. Guy Hamilton would take a break from the franchise following the exhausting process of directing Goldfinger, so Terrence Young would be brought back again into the fold for the third and final time as the director of the upcoming James Bond film. The end result would be Thunderball, and it's one of the more unique of Connery's Bond films, as well as perhaps the most controversial in terms of its production.
007, danger sign for the world's most famous gentleman agent with a license to kill and license to thrill. 007, guarantee sign of prompt delivery, night and day service.
To begin with, Thunderball was actually supposed to be the first James Bond film ever made, as opposed to Dr. No, which came before it. The original story had actually been developed by Ian Fleming in partnership with two men, screenwriter Jack Whittingham and film producer Kevin McClory, the latter of whom would play an important role in this film's upbringing. In as small of a nutshell as I can put it, Fleming had basically approached McClory years prior before meeting Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman with the idea of writing a script for a Bond film. McClory took great interest in the project, but Fleming gradually lost his when one of McClory's films had flopped in the box office. Whittingham was then brought in to assist with the writing process, and the group eventually came to a finished screenplay which was titled Longitude 78 West. Gee, that's a good name for a Bond film, isn't it? While Fleming liked the screenplay itself, he obviously wasn't enamored with the title and changed it to the more aptly named Thunderball. For whatever reason, Fleming then decided to draft a novel based on the screenplay without McClory and Whittingham's consent, and the Thunderball novel would be released in 1961. McClory filed suit and won, thus granted the rights to adapt Fleming's novel to film. Around this time, the film series was already well underway, being produced by United Artists and Eon Productions. Broccoli and Saltzman worried that McClory would become a direct competitor to their massively successful franchise, so they offered him a deal. Thunderball would become the next film in their franchise, McClory would receive full rights to review the script, and he's credited in the film as producer. Well, now that I got that out of the way, let's talk about the film itself. It starts right off the bat with a gotcha moment, leading us to think that James Bond is dead, only for the camera to slowly pan up and reveal him scouting the location. It turns out he's on the lookout for a Spectre agent responsible for killing MI6 agents, who just so happens to have the same initials as Bond does. Bond finds the guy posing as his widow at his own funeral, and they have a good old-fashioned brawl. It's pretty silly to see a goon duking it out in a dress, but they make up for it by destroying practically everything in the room. Seriously, everything but the kitchen sink gets demolished. It's great. And even after all this wear and tear, Bond still has time to show his respects. Bond manages to escape the situation by using a jetpack, which was somehow conveniently placed on the roof. How it stayed there without anyone noticing is anyone's guess. Bond flies into the air, arrives at his DB-5 getaway vehicle, and rains on the bad guys' parade. Not the most inspiring intro, but it gets the job done. I do like the Thunderball theme that follows, which is performed by Tom Jones. It has the same Bond-like quality as Goldfinger did in terms of its brass and string orchestration. Like Shirley Bassey before him, Jones just about fainted in the studio when he recorded the final note at the end of the song. It's so awesome to hear, and it gets you real hyped up for the rest of the film. Unfortunately, the hype dies down pretty much as soon as the opening credits do. A man wearing an eye patch steps out of a car as he heads into a building. It turns out he's heading to a top-secret meeting of Spectre executives as the not-yet Blofeld mystery man returns from his role in From Russia with Love to discuss his next plot. It's really interesting to see all the Spectre operatives discussing their worldwide criminal activities, as it gives the audience a greater perspective on just what kind of organization Bond is dealing with. There's also a great scene where Blofeld deals with a traitor.
The culprit is known to me. I've decided on the appropriate action.
It's a decent follow-up to the pre-title sequence, but then it goes to a clinic where Bond is relaxing and recovering from a mission. Seriously? Do we need to see this part? It's like seeing a Bond girl file her nails and put on makeup before she goes out and plays her role in the movie. Nobody cares about that part, just get to the action. Obviously, there is a purpose to this part of the film. There are two goons at the clinic where Bond is staying, who coincidentally decided to be in Spectre's latest plot in this location. One of them receives plastic surgery to look exactly like a pilot so he can steal a jet that's loaded with 2 atomic bombs, while the other is responsible for hiring the doppelganger in the first place. Naturally, Bond notices something is off when he notices a Tong tattoo in the guy's wrist and decides to sneak about at night investigating the matter. Nothing really special happens during this part of the film. Bond more or less just gets massages, then investigates for a bit, and occasionally fights a guy before chilling again for a while. It could easily have trimmed 15 minutes or so, and the story would have made just as much sense, if not more. The only memorable part is when Bond is strapped to the spinal traction machine. It's hilarious in the worst way possible.
Nice to have met you, Mr. Bond.
Hey, come back!
That has got to be one of the dumbest death traps in all of cinema. How is anyone supposed to take Bond dry humping a table to death seriously? The doppelganger, Angelo, poses as the pilot named Francois Derval and successfully delivers the jet and bombs to Spectre before being killed by Emilio Largo, the guy with the eye patch from earlier. He's played by Italian actor Adolfo Celli and goes by the codename Number 2 in the film. His evil plan is to use atomic bombs to hold a random city in either the UK or United States hostage, unless he's paid the sum of £100 million in diamonds. He's the cliché ransom villain and even looks the part with that stupid eye patch of his, but the character itself is actually pretty decent. I like how ruthless he is, even to his own henchmen. He doesn't tolerate failure and won't let anyone stand in his way.
You let him get the better of you.
No, it was a baby. It was also a girl. No, no, no.
He's not as great as other villains before him, but he's not that bad either. He and Bond do share a lot of screen time together, so it's interesting to see how they always try to one-up each other. He's also accompanied by Fiona Volpe, played by another Italian, Luciana Paluzzi. Technically, she is a Bond girl, though unlike others before her, she works for Spectre. She kills Angelo's partner in crime shortly after Angelo bites the dust, and assists Largo in conducting his operation in Nassau, Bahamas. I like the femme fatale personality she displays, innocent in one scene and devious in the next. Her interactions with Bond reflect this and are a lot of fun to watch, especially this scene.
Since you are here, would you mind giving me something to put on?
That is awesome. The main Bond girl, however, is none other than Domino Derval, played by former Miss France Claudine Auger. She's Largo's mistress throughout the film's events, happens to be the sister of Francois Derval, and always seems to wear black and white in every scene she's in. Well, better than red and blue at least. She gets tangled up between Bond's objective and Largo's plot as she tries to assist the former while also avoiding suspicion from the latter. She's actually pretty resistant to Bond's charm at first, but her character changes as she discovers the death of her brother and she realizes the gravity of danger she's in. Claudine does an amazing job in the role. I'd say out of all the Connery Bond films, she's my favorite Bond girl. She just has everything you could look for. She's drop-dead gorgeous, helps Bond in his objectives, and plays an important role in the story. And she can kick ass when she needs to.
I'm glad I killed him.
You're glad.
There is a lot to like about this film. The action scenes, while not as bombastic as Goldfinger, are still really well done. The big underwater battle near the end is definitely the highlight it's got going for. It's pretty impressive to see all this action happening underwater 55 years since it was released. Lots of people get knifed, harpooned, and just wrestle all over the place. It's not exactly elegant, but hey, I'm not complaining. One thing I can say is that Thunderball has comedy in spades. Not so much in terms of camp value, but just the sheer number of one-liners Bond says here. They're all over the place.
How do you know my friends call me Domino?
It's on the bracelet on your ankle.
So, what sharp little eyes you've got.
Wait till you get to my teeth.
You look pale, Mr. Bond. I hope I didn't frighten you.
Well, you see, I've always been a nervous passenger.
Some men just don't like to be driven.
No, some men just don't like to be taken for a ride.
He must have followed us.
I think he got the point.
Hell, even when there's no one-liners being said, the film still manages to be funny. Just seeing Q wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt and shorts is worth the price of admission for me. The setting of Bahamas is also great. It reminds me a lot of Dr. No and its setting in Jamaica, in that trouble always seems to follow Bond no matter what paradise he's in. Thankfully, we get to see more of the city life this time around, likely due to the increase in budget. Seeing the Junkanoo parade really helps bring the film to life, and gives it a sense of style that really helps it stand out from other films in the series. Also, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I do like how they included some underwater footage in between all the spy stuff. There's lots of footage of just open reefs with different kinds of fish, sharks, and all kinds of animals, which gives the film a documentary type impression that adds an air of realism to the film. But that realism probably landed a bit too close for comfort for some of the actors. Sean Connery apparently had a close call in the scene where he fights a man in the pool and Largo sends a shark after him. The set designer, Ken Adam, had a layer of plexiglass designed to keep the distance between Bond and the shark, something you can see if you squint hard enough in the film itself. But there wasn't enough plexiglass available for shooting, so a shark eventually found its way to Connery. Needless to say, he couldn't get out of that pool fast enough. Probably my favorite scene in the film is one that doesn't have any action at all. Once Bond finally gets to MI6, he's briefed on Spectre's latest terror plot. It happens in this huge room, complete with a massive map taking up a whole wall of the room. Aside from reminding me just how amazing Ken Adams' production design really is, it's also the only scene in the entire series where we see all the 00 agents in Europe in one room. And I say Europe because Moneypenny can confirm this herself.
In the conference room. Something pretty big. Every 00 man in Europe's been rushed in, and the Home Secretary too.
This means that there are even more 00 agents scattered throughout the rest of the world in the same way that Spectre has its terrorists and agents in other parts of the world, as we saw after the opening credits. It's amazing to see how Thunderball expands the world of Bond just through 2 scenes a few minutes long each, and with passing dialogue. It does still have its fair share of exposition here and there, I won't deny that, but to see MI6 and Spectre in such a grand scale behind the scenes really adds to the film's story. It demonstrates that the threat of Spectre is very real and very dangerous, and that MI6 needs to take them seriously, which adds to the thrills of James Bond's world.
Smashing figure. I don't suppose that has anything to do with your request.
Was there ever a man more misunderstood?
Now, James, you can't pull the wool over my eyes. You may be able to con the old man, but I know better.
So do I, Miss Moneypenny. And I'll thank you not to refer to me as the old man.
However, I would be remiss to say that Thunderball didn't have its fair share of flaws. I've already mentioned that it takes a long time for Bond to leave the Shrublands clinic, about 40 minutes to be precise. Having to sit through this part of the film where little to nothing substantial happens is a pretty lame chore. And as much as I enjoy some of the underwater scenes, I do have to admit that they do drag on for a really long time. I don't know, maybe it had something to do with being the first Bond film to be filmed in Panavision, but it feels like the filmmakers were just interested in showing off what they could capture on camera without thinking about if it really added to the story or not. If the film had cut its runtime down by about 20 minutes or so, I think it would have benefited greatly and keep the story's pacing more consistent rather than be such a slog in the beginning and even in parts during the middle of it. Speaking of the story, there are a few issues I have with that as well, but it mostly has to do with the interactions between Bond and Largo. You can instantly tell that they know their enemies after they first meet, especially when they spat over who gets to spend time with Domino. But for some reason, they keep up the charade. Largo even invites Bond for lunch at his Villa Palmyra, and they shoot the breeze about different things for a pretty long time. If this happened closer to the beginning of the film, it would have at least made more sense, as the two would get a chance to know each other's personalities before the main story takes off. But no, this happens more than an hour into the film at a time where they should be at each other's throats by now. Compare this to Goldfinger, where the villain not only immediately establishes he's Bond's enemy as soon as they lock eyes with each other, but threatens Bond when he tries to play innocent.
I should think our first meeting would have convinced you.
Oh, I see. You're worried about me not giving you a return game.
Both of us know perfectly well what we are talking about, Mr. Bond. But I see that it is necessary to remind you. Our job.
This all happens within a half hour of the film starting, and that's if you don't count the pool scene from earlier. It doesn't waste any time setting up the dynamics between the two. But here, it takes forever. Even though Largo knows Bond is a threat to his plot and does send his goons after him, he still tries to play nice with him, and vice versa for Bond. This whole game of who breaks their cover first goes on for almost 2 hours until the underwater climax finally happens, and it really ruins the pacing of the story for me. Not to mention, the story to begin with is kicked off almost entirely on the coincidence of Bond being in the exact same clinic as two Spectre agents. Aside from these issues, it's mostly throwaway characters that don't add much to the story. Even Felix Leiter, who once again is played by a different actor, this time by Rick Van Nutter. Man, you'd think he was having plastic surgery to keep up his cover too. That's the only explanation I can give as to why he changes faces so much. Even Bond gets sick of it.
Well, hello, 00.
Overall, Thunderball is an enjoyable film, but it feels like a mixed bag. The Bond girl is awesome, the one-liners and comedy relief are great, and the action scenes almost rival those of Goldfinger, to the point that Thunderball became the second film in the series to win an Academy Award for its special effects. But even with all this taken into consideration, it still takes a long time for the film to get going, and there are scenes throughout the middle as well which really ruin the pacing as an action spy film. There's nothing wrong with having slow build-up. Dr. No did this to an extent as well, but it had a lower budget and it still managed to escalate the stakes as the story progressed. Thunderball starts and stops quite a bit by comparison, and this makes it frustrating to watch in one sitting, at least for me anyway. It's definitely still fun to watch, but it's the first Bond film to not really blow me away in terms of awesomeness. I am aware that it was remade in 1983 by Kevin McClory, this time titled Never Say Never Again, but honestly, the less I say about that film, the better. If you can stomach the first half hour or so and don't mind sitting through a slow few parts here and there, I'd say go ahead and give it a watch. It's definitely not the best film in the series, but you'll still have a good time. This concludes my review of Thunderball. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for the next part.